My name is Hallie Miller. This is a picture of my family. Behind me is my mom, Randy. Next to me is my uncle, Marty. Next to him is his wife, Carmi. And behind her are her parents, Dolores and Vadie. This is their story.
I was born in Brooklyn, and what happened is it was 1937. It was really still the Depression, and my father was in the fruit business. They were immigrants, both parents, and we couldn't make a living.
After moving to Baltimore to support the family, Dolores' parents sent her to a Zionist camp called Habonim, an experience that would ultimately change her life forever.
When I was about 13 years old, we had Habonim, which was a Zionist organization. It was in 1943, and Israel was on the mind of many children, not like after the 1948 when the state was created, but Zionists, children who came from Zionist backgrounds, and we went to Habonim, which was Zionist camp, and that's where I met my husband at 13. As children at 13 or 14, I remember going to the with a group of children in the back of a truck, going to the English embassy here and painting it up because they were not letting immigrants from Europe come on the boats to Israel. So that was our way of fighting back at 13, 14, and 15. We painted the fence of the English embassy. But my husband did help. When Israel was becoming a state, he carried guns into a basement where Jewish people were collecting guns and putting them on the boats in the Baltimore harbor and sending them to Israel. He was only, I think, about 15 then.
A few years later, Dolores married Vadie, and they eventually moved their family to Israel.
Oh yes, when my husband graduated, he got his PhD, we had two children, Ami, who was 7, and Carmi, who was 2 years and 4 months. And we took them to Israel because I had made my husband a promise that I would definitely go to Israel. And that's what we did. And he was an agronomist. He was a soil physicist, and he worked in agronomy in Israel.
But it was a hard life, so right around the '67 war, the family returned to the States. But Dolores and Vadie always retained their condo in Ra'anana, and they visited it often.
On one of our trips to Israel, we took my in-laws as well as my parents, and we took a walk outside, and we saw in front of the hotel, they were taking pictures of Ethiopian people. At that time, there was a wonderful thing that occurred. It was Operation Moses, where there was actually a famine in Ethiopia, and they brought all these people to the Sudan, and the Israeli government picked them up on the plane. Now, they said a lot of people died on the way. And these particular people that we saw had asked us if we would be so good as to help them. And I thought they wanted money, so I said sure. But what they wanted us to do actually was bring their children to Israel.
And that's exactly what they did. In 1985, Vadie and Dolores were the first recorded civilians to assist during Operation Moses with the rescue of Ethiopian Jews.
Children were 2 and 2.5 and 1, and they didn't take them because they were afraid to take them into the desert where they had to walk before the Israelis would pick them up. So they left them there. And by the way, thousands, I don't know thousands, but hundreds of them died on the way to the desert because they were hungry and they were I don't know if they were killed or what, but quite a few got to Israel, but it was called Operation Moses. Well, anyway, we asked the people who were taking charge of these people to meet us that evening at the hotel, and I said we'd be glad to finance the children and bring them to Israel. And they said no. He said you'll have to bring them yourself, because nobody had brought individuals from Ethiopia to Israel. It was very new. Only the army had done that. So they said, go to America and find somebody who knows about doing this. So we went back, and nobody seemed to know, and we called them. For some reason, we called the State Department to get a lawyer to help us. Mm-hmm. And they gave us the name of a man called Makoria Tefesa. 2 children were living in a place called Dabat, which was like a jungle up way high in Ethiopia. It wasn't near Addis Ababa, a civilized place. And the husband who asked us to bring his children managed to contact his aunt, and she was supposed to go up and tell the grandfather who was taking care of the children to let them go when somebody came for them. But she never did, because she was so sure nobody would do it, because nobody had done anything like this before. The aunt took her 2 children and these 2 children that the parents wanted, and on the way the little girl died. She had measles, and then it's hard to think, you and I, to think that someone would die of measles, but in a country like that, when you don't have medicine, it's very possible. So she passed away. But anyway, so she brought them down to this village where they stayed for 6 months, and they established papers which said they were Christians, not Jews. Mm-hmm. And then 6 months later, he phoned and said they're ready to go. So I remember it was Sukkot. We said goodbye to our parents and my son, and we made reservations to go to Ethiopia, and we went.
Upon arrival, they met up with the lawyer, who introduced them to the surviving child, Mamush, his aunt, and his cousins.
So we came back the next day, and he brought the children and the woman, and my husband said to me, Dolores, how do you know these are the children? I said, I really don't know, but I'm taking them anyway. It was time to leave, and I was carrying the little boy Mamush. My husband was carrying Tadila, the girl, and the mother was carrying Gaitu, the boy, on her back. And she went through, and I went through. I was walking slowly, and when it came to my husband, they said, you can't go. So he said, why? So they said, this piece of paper that you were supposed to write all the money that you spent on doesn't add up. And I know it did, because we were very careful with that. So evidently he wanted a bribe, but my husband held out. In the last minute, the man wouldn't let him, but he went through himself, went through on the plane.
Since there were no direct flights from Ethiopia to Israel, the 6 travelers flew to New York, and then to Canada, and then finally to Israel. This was the first rescue mission completed by Vadie and Dolores.
Of course, a few years later, there was another, someone had heard that we had done this and asked for us to help them get four people and a mother out, and that's another story in itself. That's too long. It was way over 100,000 for the first one, way over. But listen, at that time we were making a lot of money, and and the way I felt was that when we were living through World War II, my parents and the whole world didn't really know what Hitler was doing. So even though we heard or we thought bad things were happening, we didn't believe it, so nobody really helped in America as much as they could. You know what I mean? And I figured this was our chance to make up for that. That I wasn't going to let these people die if I could save them, because there was a famine and it was bad. So I said, this is what we were going to do. See, he who saves a life saves a whole world.